Kopichanna Vallabha Girivaradhari Kopichanna Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Prajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Kopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jayam Vishnupada Paramahamsa Parivrajapacharya Ashtatara Shri Srimad Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Guru and Shri Guranga. So today is the day Srila Prabhupada departed for America. So I'll read something in relation to that. I'm not going to tell you where it is till after we're done, where it's from. Maybe you could guess, but for 30 years, but yeah, some writing, yeah. For 30 years, the Swami had attempted to launch his mission inside India, but nothing had worked. Contracts for properties fell through. Pleas for financing failed. Letters to heads of state went unanswered. He had even walked the streets of Delhi with a self-published newspaper, approaching strangers seated at outdoor cafes and politely entreating them to purchase a copy. Here he was, finally on his way to America, and maybe Srimati Maharaji was right. It was foolish for a man his age to pursue a dream with no money or context. He was a strict vegetarian. What would he eat? Winter was coming. How would he survive the cold? Teachers who had gone west before him, Swami Vivekananda, Paramahamsa, Yogananda, Rabindranath Tagore, and others, were younger and more experienced travelers. Swamiji was about to turn 70, and he had never been outside India. He had written, this is also, by the way, short. I'm not going to be reading for very long, so to pay close attention or you might miss the whole thing. He had written to his middle son, Mathura Mohan, letting him know that he was at last leaving on his mission and asking for his help. He offered Mathura Mohan a monthly salary of 100 rupees if he would agree to oversee future printings of his books and magazines while he was in America. Mathura Mohan had not forgiven his father for renouncing their family. He refused the offer of employment and declined to show up at the pier when his father boarded the Jaladuta. The Swami placed a call to his youngest son, Vrindavan Chandra. "Please come," he asked, "and take me to the ship." 26-year-old Vrindavan Chandra arrived by taxi at the Scindia residences in North Calcutta around 5 a.m. on August 13, 1965. The Scindia Freight Office had taken responsibility for loading onto the Jaladuta 200 sets of the Swami's 3-volume Srimad Bhagavatam packed in metal trunks. And Vrindavan Chandra found that his father was not carrying much, only a small suitcase, an umbrella, a trunk for personal items, and a bag of dry cereal. If the West provided nothing acceptable to eat, he could soak the cereal in water and live on that. They loaded everything into the taxi and drove off. The Jaladuta's gangplank was down, ready to receive its crew. Bhaktivedanta, or Srila Prabhupada, embraced his son, turned, and boarded the ship. "I took it calmly," Vrindavan Chandra remembered, "but psychologically, after all, he was my father. As a child, I had accompanied him on trips to Mayapur, Navadvip. I had stayed with him also in Chippiwada, Delhi in 1964. But to be very frank, the family had an extremely hard time when he took sannyas. We suffered from that. And now, going to America, I was simply crying. I was going to miss him." The crew of the Jaladuta knew what lay ahead. They had made the crossing before and were prepared for violent storms and gale-force winds. The trip across treacherous waters was scheduled to take more than a month. They had heard about their elderly passenger and watched him walk up the gangplank, ready to chase an impossible dream. Yet weren't all great journeys just that? Impossible dreams? Climbing to the top of the world's tallest mountain with crampons and gloves. What a crazy thing to do, huh? Climb to the world's tallest mountain. Diving to the bottom of the ocean in a tin bucket, riding into outer space in a giant firecracker. Was it so different, traveling halfway around the globe, armed with an umbrella and a bag of cereal, determined to re-spiritualize humanity? There were only two possible outcomes to such folly. He would succeed, or he would die trying. So there's one more in relation to this. Young Kishanlal Sharma grew up in Vrindavan. By age 10, his duties included caring for his father's cows and delivering metal containers of fresh milk to village residents. As a boy in the early 1960s, he watched Bhaktivedanta Swami go from house to house, begging alms. On days when the elder sadhu came to the Sharma home, dressed in his tattered dhoti and wearing dusty sandals on his feet, Swamiji held out a metal cup, and Krishanlal's father filled it with fresh milk. They spoke for some time of the sad shape of the world, of how fortunate they were to live in Krishna's land, and of the Swami's plans to share Krishna with the world. Mr. Sharma smiled indulgently, marveling at how consistently an old man could nurse a dream. Sometimes Mr. Sharma sent his son, Krishanlal, to bring milk to Swamiji's room in nearby Radha Damodar temple. One day, with the metal container swinging back and forth on its handlebars, young Krishanlal biked to the temple, but the gates to the Swamiji's rooms were locked. Krishanlal knocked on the door of the pujari, the temple priest. He said, "Where's Swamiji?" "Swamiji's gone," the pujari replied. "He has gone to the west." So yeah, it's a day where Srila Prabhupada boarded, or departed to America. And he obviously changed the course of history, including our lives. Not sure what we would be doing if Prabhupada hadn't come. So it's a very special day, and we can meditate on Srila Prabhupada like we should every day. Meditate on the mercy of Srila Prabhupada, and Yes. Okay. I'm sorry you're seeing me here again. I was here yesterday, so generally I know class givers don't give 2 times in a row, but there was some miscommunication, so. Some miscommunication who was going to give class, so I did it. So I'm going to do it. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, Srimad Bhagavatam, 6th Canto, Prescribed Duties for Mankind, Chapter 18, Deity's Vows to Kill Indra, Text 35. Tasmat Pativrata Naryaha Shayaskamaha Sumadhyame Yajante Nanya Bhavena Patim Atmanam Ishwaram Tasmat Pativrata Narya Shreyaskama Sumadhyame Yajantyananya Bhavena Patim Atmanam Ishwaram Tasmat Pativrata Narya Shreyaskama Sumadhyame Yajante Nanya Bhavena Patim Atmanam Ishwaram Tasmat Pativrata Narya Shreyaskama Sumadhyame Yajante Nanya Bhavena Patim Atmanam Ishwaram. Tasmat, therefore, Pativrataha, devoted to the husband, Naryaha, woman, Shreyakamaha, conscientious, Sumadhyame, O thin-waisted woman, yajante, worship, ananya bhavena, with devotion, patim, the husband, atmanam, the supersoul, ishvaram, representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Okay. Can you pass Dvijamani the mic? Can you read 35 through 39, Dvijamani? Please.
My dear wife, whose body is so beautiful, your waist being thin, a conscientious wife should be chaste and should abide by the orders of her husband. She should very devotedly worship her husband as a representative of Vasudeva. My dear gentle wife, because you have worshipped me with great devotion, considering me a representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, I shall reward you by fulfilling your desires, which are unobtainable for an unchaste wife. Diti replied, O my husband, O great soul, I have now lost my sons. If you want to give me a benediction, I ask you for an immortal son who can kill Indra. I pray for this because Indra, with the help of Vishnu, has killed my two sons, Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu. Purport. The word Indra Hanam means one who can kill Indra, but it also means one who follows Indra. The word Amrityum refers to the demigods, who do not die like ordinary human beings because they have extremely long durations of life. For example, the duration of Lord Brahma's life is stated in Bhagavad Gita, Sahasra Yuga Paryantam Aharyat Brahmano Vidhu. Even the duration of 1 day or 12 hours of Brahma is 4,300,000 years multiplied by 1,000. Thus the duration of his life is inconceivable for an ordinary human being. The demigods are therefore sometimes called Amara, which means one who has no death. In this material world, however, everyone has to die. Therefore the word Amrityum indicates that Diti wanted a son who would be equal in status to demigods. Upon hearing Diti's request, Kashyapa Muni was very much aggrieved. Alas, he lamented, now I face the danger of the impious act of killing Indra. Purport. Although Kashyapa Muni was eager to fulfill the desire of his wife Diti, when he heard that she wanted a son to kill Indra, his jubilation was immediately reduced to nothing because he was averse to that idea. Kashyapa Muni thought, alas, I have now become too attached to material enjoyment. Taking advantage of this, my mind has been attracted by the illusory energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the form of a woman, my wife. Therefore, I am surely a wretched person who will glide down toward hell.
Can you read one more, please?
This woman, my wife, has adopted the means that follows her nature, and therefore she is not to be blamed. But I am a man, therefore all condemnation upon me. I am not at all conversant with what is good for me, since I could not control my senses. Purport. The natural instinct of a woman is to enjoy the material world. She induces her husband to enjoy this world by satisfying his tongue, belly and genitals, which are called Jiva, Udara and Upashta. A woman is expert in cooking palatable dishes so that she can easily satisfy her husband in eating. When one eats nicely, his belly is satisfied, and as soon as the belly is satisfied, the genitals become strong. Especially when a man is accustomed to eating meat and drinking wine and similar passionate things, he certainly becomes sexually inclined. It should be understood that sexual inclinations are meant not for spiritual progress, but for gliding down to hell. Thus Kashyapa Muni considered his situation and lamented. In other words, to be a householder is very risky unless one is trained and the wife is a follower of her husband. A husband should be trained at the very beginning of his life. Komara acharet pragno dharman bhāgavatam iha. Srimad Bhagavatam 761. During the time of brahmacārya or student life, a brahmacārī should be taught to be expert in bhāgavata-dharma, devotional service. Then when he marries, if his wife is faithful to her husband and follows him in such life, the relationship between husband and wife is very desirable. However, a relationship between husband and wife without spiritual consciousness but strictly for sense gratification is not at all good. It is said in Srimad Bhagavatam 12:2-3 that especially in this age, Kali Yuga, Dampatye Piruchirhetu, the relationship between husband and wife will be based on sexual power. Therefore, household life in this Kali Yuga is extremely dangerous unless both the wife and husband take to Krishna consciousness.
Om Ganatividandasya Gananchana Shalakya Chakshulan Mudhatamena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukam Kuridivachalam Pangam Langayate Girim Yat Kripa Tamaham Vande Shri Gurundinitaranam Vancha Kavalirubhishcha Kripa Sundhubevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So, Deity is wanting, she's wanting, what is she wanting? Immortal son who can kill Indra. This is what she wants. She wants to get revenge because her particular conception is that her sons, Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu, they died, or they were killed by Vishnu because of Indra's request. So she's wanting to kill Indra. This is her motive. And so as we'll see in upcoming verses and chapters, that her particular desire is fulfilled. And today, it's mentioning, this is Kashyapa Muni thinking in relation to his wife. This woman, my wife, has adopted a means that follows her nature, and therefore she is not to be blamed. But I am a man, therefore all good condemnation upon me. I am not all conversant with what is good for me, since I could not control my senses. So Srila Prabhupada explains in the purport, which we'll go through now, you could say the dangers of the man and woman phenomenon in the material world. So, Srila Prabhupada it's been quoted, Srila Prabhupada saying that, okay, best if all the men, they stay brahmacharis, right? All the men stay brahmacharis. And best if all the women get married. And they asked Prabhupada, so, okay, well, how are we going to do that? And he said, well, that's for you to figure out. Huh? Yeah, so that's what he was saying, because he's saying that they should get married, the women should get married, that's good, and the men should stay brahmachari, that's good. So then what to do? Now, of course, naturally these things fall in place. Well, I guess naturally people tend to get married. That's the most popular ashram, it seems, throughout the Hare Krishna movement. You go to India, it's the most popular ashram, although there's a lot more brahmacharis in India than there are in America. There's a lot more people than there are in India than there are in America also. But you go to India, you go to Russia, you go whatever, all the continents of the world, and you look at all the devotee communities, and by far the most popular ashram is the Grihastha ashram, the householder ashram, apartment holder ashram, van ashram. That's the most popular one. And brahmacharis are there throughout the world, scattered here and there. And then you have the least popular one is the sannyasa ashram, it seems. So yeah, things naturally, you could say, at least Srila Prabhupada's recommendation for all the women to get married, that pretty much naturally happens. But for the men to stay brahmacharis, that's not happening, so much. But anyways, that was Srila Prabhupada's recommendation. And Srila Prabhupada say, there's one quote from Prabhupada that said, men are good, women are good, combination, bad. And this is Prabhupada's experience, because it's not that when Srila Prabhupada was around, means manifesting his pastimes here on this particular earth, that the marriages were successful. There was a lot of difficulties also in Prabhupada's times with marriages. And Srila Prabhupada was against, which of course nowadays is, you could say, questionable or might infuriate people. But practically, just Vedic civilization in general, but Srila Prabhupada was against divorce. Which we won't get into too much because it's not the main point we want to discuss, or I want to discuss. But Srila Prabhupada's experience, people would get married and then have problems, and they come to Prabhupada, can I separate? Can I divorce? And Prabhupada didn't like that. And one time there's a case where a devotee came to Prabhupada asking about that. And Srila Prabhupada said yes. And then the devotee was thinking, his servant was thinking, why is Prabhupada saying yes? Yes, you could divorce. So Prabhupada said, why is Prabhupada saying yes to this? Does anyone remember the younger devotees? Remember? Yeah. Yeah, they're going to do it anyways. Better to avoid the fence of guru aparat, disobeying the instructions of the spiritual master. Because if he said no, and they did it anyways, then they're disobeying the instructions of the spiritual master. Whereas they're going to do it anyways, so he said, okay, fine, you could do that. So Prabhupada was actually increasingly over time becoming more and more disgusted, actually, with devotees marrying and then having issues. One thing for those who are sannyasis or those who will become sannyasis, whatever, you could say it's future stuff, but future stuff's good too, sometimes, future talk. But nowadays, very intelligently actually, Niranjana Swami, very intelligently, he set up this whole mentor system that they have in Ukraine and Russia. And part of that system is that none of his disciples go to them with their marriage problems. They go to the mentors and they go to other grihastas, senior grihastas. In this way. But anyways, Prabhupada was actually more and more, he didn't like dealing with all of this. And you could understand how it's a bit of a nuisance, right? But also Srila Prabhupada was getting more and more, you could say, disgusted with devotees approaching him for sannyas, both. So that's another thing. So anyways, Prabhupada said, okay, men are good, women are good, combination's bad. Why? Because as it's being explained in this particular purport, they're like a perfect match for the perfect storm. In one of Devaki's books I was looking through the other day, she says she gives all these seminars. The household is good. It's glad, I'm happy somebody's, because it needs a lot of help, actually. Means because the majority of the population of ISKCON is householders, they need education on what it means to be a householder, because they need to be strong. Because if they're not strong, then they could say water down or cause a lot of harm to ISKCON in many ways. So anyway, she's giving seminars all around Europe and America and so on, and she does this exercise where she says, okay, list all the problems that there are in householder life on the board. You write it on the board. So it's like financial problems, following the regular principles problems. The husband's more serious than the wife, or the wife's more serious than the husband, or the kids are troublesome and acting up, or on and on and on and on and on. There's like a big list. It just keeps on going. All the problems. You could talk to, with all due respect, but you could talk to some householders and you could, there's a lot of problems. Actually, much more problems than a brahmacārī could ever dream of. Brahmacharis think they have problems, but just naturally being in the Grihastha ashram, there's much more problems. So anyways, she said, now write, and then she'd write 3 ways how to deal with these problems. Okay, one is you go to your mentor and work things out. Now you could say, okay, well, that's a simple solution. Well, not so simple. What if you don't have a mentor? Then you don't have anyone to go to. So you go to the mentor. Okay, another thing is, okay, you focus on your sadhana. Okay, well, that's a simple solution. Right? Well, what if you're not doing that? Focus on your sadhana, mentor, So anyways, there's like 3 main ways that she calculated how to solve so many problems. It was interesting. But the most interesting thing is people don't follow it, or they don't know about it. So, okay, man and woman, okay, equals bad, but naturally, by nature, it's going to happen. Not with everybody, it doesn't have to happen. But with some, it's going to happen. So therefore, the idea is that there's education behind how to deal with that. Now, of course, nowadays in Kali Yuga, it's very difficult because I've seen devotees, neither are they exactly good brahmacharis, nor are they good householders, nor can they take sannyas. They're just kind of like, so it's tough. But if we do, it's not hopeless. If we do surrender to Krishna, if we do try, we can fall in one of these and be successful. So yeah, Srila Prabhupada explains the man and woman issue in the purport. Is saying, okay, there's a woman, there's a man, and woman's expert in cooking. And in this way, she satisfies the senses of the husband, right? Tongue, belly, genitals, straight line, especially for persons eating meat, drinking wine, and some other passionate things. Therefore, one of the reasons why it's the principles of no intoxication, no meat eating, because it helps curb this sensuality, which is a distraction from Krishna consciousness. But even aside from that, even not taking intoxication and eating meat, there's still built within the human this strong sensual pullings. So again, the combination of a man and woman is a very perfect match for that. And a woman having her urges and a man having his urges, It's dangerous. And as Srila Prabhupada said, it should be understood that sexual inclinations, this is so not popular in the modern world, this sentence right now. This is like, it should be understood that sexual inclinations are not meant for spiritual progress, but for gliding down to hell. So in other words, these desires for sexual desires and Krishna consciousness, they just go ill together. They just don't mix. And aside from not mixing, Prabhupada says they're meant for gliding down to hell. So it's a very serious thing, as Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, right? What does he say? That there are 3 gates leading to hell. Remember which ones they are? Lust, anger, greed. There are 3 gates. Someone was here speaking recently. They said, maybe it was Vijay Prabhu or somebody. They said you should take the keys to those doors and throw them away. Who was saying that? Yeah, Bhakti Sundar Goswami. Yeah, because the doors are there. You say the keys to the door, just take them and throw them away. Get rid of them. And of course, first and foremost, we need to be convinced that they're actually doors to hell. Some people aren't convinced. So, I'll engage my lust in Krishna consciousness. I'll engage my greed in Krishna consciousness. I'll engage my anger in Krishna consciousness. People use it. Prabhupada was angry, right? So I could use my anger too. Prabhupada was also a pure devotee. So how much are we a pure devotee to that degree we could use our anger? In lust, a lot of devotees nowadays especially, it's a whole practically, I don't want to say movement, but maybe it is, of devotees just surrendering, to lust pretty much. And we don't really have to follow that other difficult principle. And acting like they could engage in Krishna consciousness and it is something pure or good. But first, we have to be convinced what it is and what the Shastra says. It's not good. That might be difficult to accept. And then we have to work on getting free from it. Which is possible. It's possible by practice of Krishna consciousness, right? Like Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, what does he say? Rasavarjam rasopyasa param dushtva navartate, right? Param means higher pleasure, not the lower pleasures, the higher pleasure. And he says it's possible to control, to transcend, to forget about all this with a higher pleasure in relation to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So we shouldn't think it's impossible, especially brahmacharis, especially sannyasis, especially vanaprasthas, right? Especially grihasthas, especially everyone shouldn't think it's impossible and just give up. Because once we give up, it's Maya's got us by the neck, actually. Yes, I got another one. They're Krishna conscious. I got them by their neck. And because that's actually what the illusory energy wants. She just wants to convince us she wants us to have misconceptions about what Krishna consciousness is and to act on those. And then she has us by the neck. But we should, someone say, all right, well, I'm convinced, but I can't exactly make it up to the mark. Okay, fine, but at least be convinced of the right thing. And then work our way up. And therefore, we need training. Komara acharit pragyo dharman bhagavataniha. We need training. From the very early ages, 5, we should join the brahmacārya ashram. Anybody join at 5? Oh yeah, we got one here. All right, Ramapati Chai. He was 10. Okay, he was 5 years later. A little late. We have this devotee traveling with His Holiness Giraj Swami Sura. I was talking to him actually, and he told me he joined when he was 16, because I was telling him, I got initiated when I was young, and he said, I also got initiated when I was young. I said, how old were you? He said, I was 16. I said, okay, I was a little older than you. I was 21, you know. And I said, when did you join the brahmacārya ashram? He said, when I was 16. You know, Bhakti Swami put him in Saffron. He was traveling with him around the world. So he's 31. So, but from the very beginning, and if we haven't joined in the beginning, all right, fine. Then we join a little later. That's good too. And then we start our training. And for those who can, which again, we shouldn't think it's impossible. But for those who can, and are so inclined, and fortunate, they can continue as in the brahmacārya ashram. And some of those who are misfortunate, they can take sannyas. No, because actually brahmacārya ashram, it's like Devamrita Swami said, it's the best ashram, because you don't have all the problems of the householder ashram and the what do you call temptations of sense gratification that it awards. And then the sannyas ashram, you don't got all the problems of the sannyas ashram, like if you eat a third burfi at the dinner table, it's going to be spoke about all over the world. I'm just joking, but you know, it's people talk all over the world, you know. News goes around quick. And all the other difficulties of the sannyas ashram, they are there. Brahmacārya ashram, very good. But some of those will go onto the sannyas ashram, which is also necessary, which is also needed, which is also a great service to the devotees and to mostly the devotees, because the general public could care less if someone's a sannyasi, but to the devotees, it's a great service, and it's great service for the devotee as well, because they're fully engaged. They have to be. They should be. And then there's also the vanaprastha ashram. Oh, street sweeping, huh? Street sweeping. There's also the vanaprastha ashram, which is also a nice ashram. And I can say Karnamrita is like a vanaprastha, right? You got Prabhupada Das. They're very good examples, actually. Spending time in Vrindavan, spending time in Mayapur, engaging, you know, it's very good. So some will do that, and some will enter the Grihastha ashram. And Srila Prabhupada stressing in his books over and over and over again that they have to be careful. It's dangerous unless both the wife and husband take to Krishna consciousness. I mean, sometimes what does that mean, take to Krishna consciousness? That has to be clearly understood. So I'm taking to Krishna consciousness. I'm engaging my lust and my material lust, my material anger, my material greed in Krishna consciousness. I work like a donkey and don't give a cent to the Hare Krishna movement. I'm engaging my material greed in Krishna consciousness. Whatever, all the other ones. So, take to Krishna consciousness means under very strict, clear guidance of the spiritual master. And then it's not extremely dangerous. It's just dangerous. I'm just joking. Then it could be uplifting. Then it could be an ashram. Then it could be moving towards light rather than staying in darkness. It could be actually uplifting, and it may be necessary for some, and for those who there is a way to do it, and it can be uplifting. But even though it can be uplifting, ultimately also one's supposed to move on to the vanaprastha ashram, at least. All right, so we'll have another similar verse tomorrow by Vijay Prabhu. Actually turning up the heat a little more. So, does anybody have any question or comment about? All right, very good. Judge. Okay.
I have a question. So, as you mentioned that now people join the brahmacārya ashram quite late, in their 20s and even later sometimes. But according to the instructions of Srimad Bhagavatam, we should give up or move on to another ashram after staying for 25 years in the brahmacārya ashram.
Yeah, it's like, well, I joined when I'm 25. What am I supposed to do?
My question is, what would be the identifying factor for you to move on to another ashram besides the central desire from brahmacārya to grihastha?
Yeah.
If you join late.
I mean, someone was what are they saying? They're saying that the identifying factor. So, like in Bhagavad Gita, you could say, okay, well, what will repression accomplish? Now, what's the difference between tolerating and repressing, right? Because it's explained that we should tolerate, actually, the urges of the senses. For example, the tongue and the belly may want to eat a lot, right? We say, like, you tolerate it. You at least control it. You have to control it to some degree, right? So it's like a tolerating, the pushings. So like you could say, if a man is tolerating his, you could say, inclination to be with a woman, for example, in a relationship with a woman, okay, there's tolerating there. But what's the difference between repressing and tolerating? So one devotee was explaining that repressing is like, well, if you keep on kind of like, thinking and thinking and thinking and thinking and just can't forget and thinking, and you're just like really like, it's just overwhelmingly, after something. And so then it's okay, maybe it's indication, they're not really brahmacārya and then they should move on. Of course, that has to be under the direction of the spiritual master and the shiksha gurus, diksha gurus. So, but another indication is, okay, like we could say, like some devotees, they could say, okay, they might want to, because one of the things of being a grihastha is again more independence. You have more independence. I mean, seemingly independence. Like, I don't know. A lot of devotees, devotees in the household or ashram. I mean, it's hard for them to get away for 2 weeks or 3 weeks. To go to India or here and there. I mean, I talked to many of them. Of course, there's some of them who have certain jobs and they're able to move more. But a lot of them, it's 2 weeks at the most. So that's why I would say seemingly independence. Brahmacharis go to India for a month, or whatever. And then they go traveling, you see the guru, and they go here and they go there, and it's a little more. So seemingly independence is, okay, you got your own money, you're making money. That's also kind of questionable. Right? Anyways, you got your own money, got your own, property on this, that, and you're kind of, so in other words, for people who have that in them, the desire to kind of own and to control and to expand and to kind of, that's also indications like that. But also we should note that it's not that somebody who has these particular desires, it doesn't mean that they're like someone who's a householder doesn't mean they're less of a devotee. Someone may be able to sleep on the floor, on the hard floor, without a mat, hard floor, cold hard floor, and they may be able to, go on a book distribution every day and do deity worship and, do all these things, right? Live a simple life, simple brahmacārī life. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're better devotees than somebody like Suvas Prabhu, who probably doesn't sleep on the floor and who is, has a wife and who is, whatever. It doesn't necessarily mean that, because ultimately it's about the consciousness. So, we should note that. But some devotees, just built into their body, built into their mind, they may have certain inclinations, Like the kings in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Ambarish Maharaj, all of these different devotees, they were, they had a lot of opulence. So it doesn't mean that they were less devotees. They were pure devotees. So, but yeah, there's certain inclinations that are there that might be indications. But ultimately, we should check with our spiritual master and devotees, and ultimately everybody should give a good solid, time to the brahmacārī ashram, because more time the better, actually, in the sense that the more they're trained, they'll be better grihastas, practically speaking. Oh, that's a nice ringtone.
So you don't think that when you're dealing with repression, just taking it as a period in your life where you just have to, like, you feeling very agitated, but if you just take it as something that you just really have to work and tolerate very strongly, then eventually that will go away. You don't think that's also possible?
No, it's that's also there, that there might just be challenges within one's life that they could overcome. By the power of Krishna consciousness, by the practice of Krishna consciousness, one can overcome all challenges. So it depends on a person. It's like someone may be simple, someone may be able to be a brahmacārī, in many ways, but they may be challenged by, say, desires, but they could overcome that. Yeah, definitely. And many times those persons are encouraged to do that. Don't just, like, they have so many qualifications that make a good brahmacārī. Brahmacārī is also it's not the goal or something. Goal is the servant of Krishna, a devotee, right? But they may have many good qualifications, but they may be struggling with certain desires, right? But they could overcome that and then move on. Just like there's so many devotees in our history who were like that. And if they would have given up, then they wouldn't have been able to do what they did. And like Bilva Mangala Thakur, right? We all know the story. What happened in the beginning, what happened in the middle, and why he lost his eyes. Now, he could have just given up and said, all right, well, it's just like, well, I'm a little bit too materially contaminated. I'm not going to go to Vrindavan after all. But he went to Vrindavan, and he became a Paramahamsa pure devotee, the historical personality. So, but he could have just, went back to the town and, all right, what was her name? Chintamani. All right, Chintamani, well, I was inspired to go to Vrindavan, but on the way I had some issue. So I'm back now. And I didn't make it Vrindavan after all. So, and then, but he continued. And, so that's there too. All right, does anybody have any other? Hare Krishna.
I have a question about, you mentioned higher test, and how I understand that no, it doesn't matter what ashram we have, but we should have attain this higher test, and only, how I understand from Srila Prabhupada books, only this aspect can, how to say, save us.
Yes.
And what? And please explain how you understand how to attain this higher taste.
Okay. So yeah, the higher taste will save the brahmacārī, the grihastha, the vanaprastha, and the sannyasi. That's true. Everyone has to have a higher taste, or else it just doesn't work. So how to attain the higher taste? We have to start out at actually not start out, we have to start, and in the middle and the end we have to be very humble. It's tough, you know. Shushu sho shadadanasya vasudeva kata ruchihi syan mahat seva vipra punyatirtha nashevana. By serving those great souls who are completely free from vice, great service is done, and one attains a taste for hearing the messages of Vasudeva, Krishna. So we have to serve the spiritual master, we have to serve the devotees. And one of the main things, or one of the main ways we serve Srila Prabhupada, and we should understand that Srila Prabhupada's desires, to accept a spiritual master means that spiritual master has accepted the desires of Srila Prabhupada as their life. So in other words, our spiritual master's mission is the same as Srila Prabhupada's. That's what it means to be a spiritual master. So what is the desire of our spiritual master? What is the desire of Srila Prabhupada? The desire, main desire you could say, main desires, is for us to take to Krishna consciousness. It means to understand what it is and practice it properly so we could get the full result. And also to give Krishna consciousness as far as possible. Prasadam, book distribution, Harinam, being a good example, keeping the bathroom clean. Just give Krishna consciousness as far as possible to everyone, whoever we meet. Yadidekataka Krishna Badesh. Wherever we go, whoever we meet, to give them the message of Krishna. And this way liberate the land. So that's the desire. And so in other words, that's how we could serve them. And by serving them, we get a higher taste. And especially for brahmacharis. Brahmacharis should use the term preach. Preach, preach, preach. They shouldn't just not do that. They should, be active in that way. Because that's the nectar, actually, of brahmacharya life. That's one of the reasons. That's one of the reasons people. That's why we have our time. That's what our time is meant for, actually. We're not going to a job 9 to 5 for a reason, and the reason is so we could preach, preach, preach. And we shouldn't think, I like preaching. We should think preaching is my life. There's a difference. So, and that comes in different ways. Like I said, book distribution, Harinam, prasadam, talking to guests when they come, trying to cultivate them. So by serving pure devotees, by serving devotees, like Srila Prabhupada, the spiritual master of devotees, then that verse, Shu Shu Sho Shadadanasya Vasudeva Kataruchi, 1, 2, 16. Canto 1, Chapter 2, Text 16. So if we read that purport, that explains how to get that higher taste. And then we get the higher taste, and that will save us. Or as one devotee used to say, Sura, who's no longer with us, Sura Prabhu, Prabhu disciple, he said, Seva will save you. This means service will save us. It means save us from the material ocean, and much more than save us, it will give us, Krishna Prem. So, all right, Tyler. No.
I think he says your seva will save you.
Oh yeah. Okay.
This is just a quick note. I was just making a connection and wondering if we can elaborate a little bit further on when I was at a criminal justice class in college. The professor was talking to police officers that were in training, and he was saying there's 4 things that'll get you fired, and the acronym was GULP: greed, anger, lust, and the P was peer group pressure. So that'll get you fired if you're a police officer.
Peer group pressure?
Like hanging out with your buddies and getting involved with their ideas. Like peer pressure.
Yeah.
They called it peer group pressure. But
like hanging out with other police officers, getting bad ideas?
like, let's say, they go rogue and you follow with them. Like being pressured by your peers.
Okay.
You might make decisions.
Oh, maybe being pressured by the peers to engage in the other goal activities.
Probably, yeah.
I see.
Yeah, and then the Buddhists called
Greed, anger, lust, and peer
pressure.
Gulp.
Yeah, they called it gulp. Yeah. And he goes, gulp, and he goes, and then he would always, because he would always say it over and over, it was like his anthem, and he goes, and which one's a freight train coming at you? Lust. So what are the 4 things that get you fired? Greed, anger, lust, peer group pressure. What's the freight train coming at you? Lust. So. Then the Buddhists call greed, anger, and lust the uncontrollable urges. So their method is detach. If it arises, detach, because you can't control it. So what do you think about how we view greed, anger, and lust in terms of, the Buddhists say it's uncontrollable, the police officers, you'll get fired if you do it. So how do we view those urges? Are they controllable? I mean...
Yes, they are controllable.
Great, that's good news, because they just have detachment as the option.
I think a lot of these Buddhists have a difficult time, actually, because they must have a difficult time.
So we can control it through the process of Krishna consciousness.
Yes.
Yeah. And then we won't be disturbed by them.
Like one time I was at this camp in North Carolina with His Holiness Bhakti Swami, and he was giving a talk there. I went with Santosh on a overnight flight. I'll never do that again. Those are really terrible. Red-eye flight, they call it, and it's cheaper for a reason, because it's terrible. Because the next day you get there, you're just completely wasted, and you got to get on. You have to get on with the day's activities, which is really bad. So we're having a hard time, Santosh and myself. And anyway, so I went there, and it was a nice time. We stayed there for a few days. Hasagrami was there, and Nitagore, and Santosh. And so in the class, one of the classes, Jayadvaita Swami was also there. In the class, Bhakti Swami was saying how he spent a lot of time in Thailand, preaching. There's a lot of Buddhists over there. And he was saying how the process that they understand it to be is so miserable. And also the goal is so miserable. It's like the process of just detaching from everything and focusing on a point, whatever they're doing. It's just very miserable. And the goal's miserable, the void or whatever. So it's saying that people are just engaged in a bunch of sense gratification. There's just difficult, and so that's the difficulty, with certain processes that they make the material world look very attractive. That's Mayavad does it actually. So we don't say it's uncontrollable. We say it's controllable. Vacho vegam, manasakroda vegam, jiva vegam, adarapasta vegam. So all the urges can be controlled if we engage them in Krishna consciousness. If we engage our senses in the service of the master of the senses, Rishikesh, then he'll control them. So therefore we have to be engaged physically, mentally, emotionally, psychologically, everything has to be engaged. And then it's able to control. And then by that proper learning how to properly control, then that verse says, Vacha vegam manasokroda vegam jita vegam adorapasta vegam etan vegam yo vishaheta dira, the sober person, yo vishaheta sarvam epimam prativim shishya. That person can make disciples all over the world. So So in other words, this training is actually meant to help us become spiritual masters ourselves, which we're supposed to do, whether formally as Diksha Gurus or informally as Shiksha Gurus. We should be able to control our senses and guide devotees. So that's the idea. So it is possible. Definitely. So, all right, does anybody have any last comment or question? What's for breakfast? I don't know, you gotta ask Govardhan. Okay, Granthad Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.